The fighter is one of the most iconic classes in Dungeons & Dragons, encompassing everything from knights in shining armor to lithe, nimble archers wielding bows. In this video, we are going to cover all of the changes to the fighter class in the 2024 Player's Handbook. My name is Nathan, and if you're new here, well, welcome to the channel. I typically make videos about Dungeons & Dragons every week. And yeah, if you like what you see, feel free to hit that subscribe button. I make all kinds of content here, from covering classes to different kinds of mechanics about the game and making builds. Those are some of my favorite things to do. So here is our agenda for this video. First, I'm going to give an overview of the class and kind of talk about what I believe the role of the core class is. Importantly, in this video, as in all of my videos in this series, I'm not going to be covering the subclasses and their features in detail, although I will give kind of broad strokes of what the different subclasses do. Then we're going to go through all the features of the fighter class from level 1 to level 20, and I've broken this down into 5 level sections to make it easier. Then I'll talk a little bit about multiclassing the fighter and how that has changed under the 2024 rules, and then I'm going to go into a summary and give the class some ratings as a whole. So first up, class overview and role. The fighter they're a martial character, but interestingly, they can be strength or dexterity based. Their class features don't particularly force them to go either way, and that really kind of goes into the flexibility of the character. Now, in theory, you could do a character that has a high strength and a high dexterity to use both melee and ranged weapons, although that's probably not ideal in terms of how your stats are going to work out. If I had to summarize the role of the core fighter class, you are a durable damage dealer. The fighter's features go towards making them tougher as well as outputting damage, and that's generally about it. They have some limited control abilities thanks to a few new features, but other than that, they're pretty much combat focused and are designed to stick around and output damage. They're obviously capable of excelling at both melee or ranged combat depending on how you build them, and that's again kind of goes into the flexibility of the fighter. Another cool thing about the fighter class is their resources are predominantly based on short rests. There are a few classes in the game that are like this, and many classes like the barbarian have received buffs to do better with short rests, but generally speaking, a fighter should be pretty much ready to go with their full arsenal after just a short rest for most subclasses. Interestingly, under the 2024 rules, the fighter has also gained one important notable out-of-combat trick, which they didn't have before to kind of help with skills, and that does make them a little more well-rounded than just the one-dimensional of I'm good at combat. All right, here is the table of all the features for the fighter class. Now, there are a lot of things that were changed or improved. Generally speaking, across the board, there are a lot of quality of life improvements or slight buffs. Nothing directly about the fighter class itself was nerfed, although there were additionally there were also a few mechanical changes with the rules that do help how the fighter works. So first up, all the things that are new on the list, and I've put a green box around these. So weapon masteries are obviously new. Tactical mind, tactical shift, tactical master, and studied attacks are also all new features for the fighter. And some of these are going to involve some of the changed class features, namely second wind. Everything that starts with tactical is something that improves how second wind works, and second wind has also seen some changes. So next up, these are all the things that the fighter class has, their features that have seen changes. So there are changes to second wind, namely it has charges now instead of just being one use per short rest, and the number of charges you can see scales as we get to higher levels. Action Surge has seen some changes, namely a lot of the combos that you could do using Action Surge to do like enhanced spell casting have been nerfed, and we'll get into that when we talk about the Action Surge feature at fighter level 2. And then Indomitable has seen a significant buff that actually makes it a very much so worthwhile feature. All right, so at level 1, so the primary abilities of fighter is strength or dexterity. They have a D10 hit dice. They're proficient in strength and constitution saving throws. They get to pick 2 skills from the following list: acrobatics, animal handling, athletics, history, insight, intimidation, persuasion, perception, and survival. They're proficient with simple and martial weapons. They don't get any tool proficiencies, and they're proficient with all armor and shields, and nothing here has changed. As for their features at level 1, they get a fighting style, and this has been slightly reworked, although it hasn't really changed. So the way it's worded now is you gain a fighting style feat of your choice, and you can swap it on gaining a fighter level. Here are all of the different fighting style feats available. These are the same as the fighter had as of the Tosh's rules expansion under the 2014 rules. But one of the interesting things here is now that fighting styles are feats, all of them have a prerequisite of you having the fighting style feature. Any class that has a fighting style feature can actually pick additional fighting styles as feats when you level up. Although unlike general feats, they don't provide any stats, so I'm not sure exactly why you would want to do this, but that is an interesting change here. And all the different fighting styles can be used to support a variety of different kind of archetypes of characters, whether you want to be the guy in heavy armor with the big weapon, or you want to be using a sword and shield, or you want to be using a bow or dual wielding. There are all of those and more can be encompassed by the different fighting styles, and it's just really a way to customize your fighter to your liking. The next feature is Second Wind. We get 2 uses of Second Wind per long rest, and we recover 1 per short rest. And as a bonus action, we can recover 1d10 plus our fighter level in hit points. That's all you can do with Second Wind for now, but you have more charges now than you did before. Under the 2014 rules, you can only use this once per short rest, and that was it. So now, with the additional charges and the charge scaling, Second Wind will be available much more often. And as we get to higher levels, there will be more ways to use it. And the next feature is Weapon Mastery. So as a first level fighter, we get 3 weapons that we can use the mastery properties with, and we can swap 1 out per long rest. This is a very powerful new feature that's pretty much shared by all the martial classes. We covered it a little bit in the Barbarian already, but Fighter gets more masteries than any other class, and they get features later that kind of synergize and leverage these a little more. So all the different weapon masteries are available. There's Cleave, which allows you to make an additional attack against a target in reach, namely can be used with axe-like weapons that are big enough. There's Grage, which does extra damage. It causes your attacks to do a small amount of damage even if they miss. There's Nick, which enhances dual wielding by letting you make the bonus action attack from the light property as part of your attack action instead. There's Push, which lets you push a creature that's larger or smaller, 10 feet or less, no save when you hit. There's Sap, which gives the enemy a disadvantage on their next attack. Slow reduces an enemy's movement speed by 10 feet. Topple forces them to make a Constitution save, I believe, or be knocked prone. And Vex gives you advantage on your next attack against the target. And there's a table of all of these, and this just goes further to customize your fighter. Now, importantly, we do get 3. And so one of the things that has been changed with the rules is that fighters can actually make pretty good use out of weapon swapping to combine masteries. I'm going to talk about that real quick here. So, as part of the wording of the new attack action, there's this bullet called Equipping and Unequipping Weapons. And the rules say that we can either equip or unequip 1 weapon when we make an attack as part of the attack action, and we can do so either before or after the attack. So basically, because of this, we can draw or stow 1 weapon per attack as part of the attack action, either immediately before or after. And we can use this to combine weapon masteries by swapping weapons between attacks. Additionally, we also still get our 1 free object interaction per turn. You can see those rules in the player's handbook on page 24, which means that we have 1 additional draw or stow. So for example, if we were a 5th level fighter and had extra attack, here's just one way that you could combine weapon masteries. So if we start with a pike out, the pike has the push property. So we're going to walk up to an enemy and we're going to make an attack against them, and if we hit, we're going to push them so they end up adjacent to another enemy, and then we're going to stow our pike. Then we're going to walk up so both the enemies are next to each other and within range, and we're going to draw our halberd before our second attack and make an attack against the first target. Then we'll activate the Cleave Mastery, enabling us to attack the second target, and then we can stow our halberd. And then we can use our bonus free object interaction to get our pike back out. And let's say we had the Polearm Master feat, we could use our bonus action to hit one of those enemies with the haft and potentially push them away. So that was an example combo where we used the Push Mastery to set up the Cleave Mastery, and then we're able to swap back and potentially set up a reaction attack from the Polearm Master feat by using spacing. And so that's just one example of a combo that you can do with weapon masteries. A lot of these work better in the white room when you assume that you're only going to have mundane weapons, and once you get a magic weapon or two, you're probably not really going to be wanting to do this as much because you will lose damage by not using your good item. But a lot of the combos are pretty cool and very interesting things that you can do. All right, moving on to level 2, let's talk about Action Surge and the changes to it. So pretty simple, once per turn, well, on our turn, we can take one additional action except the magic action. The only thing that has changed here is that we can't take the magic action anymore. Under the 2014 rules, you could use Action Surge to do any action. So you could do, if you were a spellcaster and had fighter levels, you could cast a spell, Action Surge, and cast another spell. But you can't do that anymore. And in my opinion, this is probably a good thing. The spell Action Surge spell combo was also hit on the other end in that the rules also say you can only cast one spell with a spell slot per turn now. And I think dipping into fighter to get Action Surge on a caster to be able to cast spells was a little silly. And now this feature is much more useful with marshals or potentially with spellsword type characters. You can cast a spell and then Action Surge and make attacks. So that is allowed, and you get one Action Surge per rest, so it comes back on a short or long rest, the same as before. Additionally, at level 2, we get a new feature called Tactical Mind. And what this says is that when we fail an ability check, we can expend one use of our second wind to roll a d10 and add it to the check, potentially turning it into a success. And if the check still fails even after this d10 boost, this use of your second wind isn't expended. I really like this. This is a great boost for the fighter's out of combat skills. I think this is probably one of the reasons why second wind has more charges, so you can do things like this. I love just how this makes it count when it matters, and the fact that you don't lose your second wind if you fail the check means it doesn't like feel bad if you used it to try to save the check and it still fails, which is, I just really like that. Moving on to level 3, fighters get their subclass at this level. The subclasses presented in the 2024 Player's Handbook are the Battlemaster, the Champion, the Eldritch Knight, and the Psy Warrior. Now, none of these are new classes, new subclasses. The Battlemaster, Champion, and Eldritch Knight were the subclasses in the 2014 Player's Handbook. That said, the Battlemaster, the Champion, and the Eldritch Knight have all seen some small changes and generally buffs. Champion has actually seen a pretty heavy rework. And the Psy Warrior is pretty much imported one-to-one from Natasha's Cauldron of Everything book and really hasn't seen any changes. Level 4, fighters get an additional use of Second Wind and additional weapon mastery, and they get their first ability score improvement or feat. Now, unlike other classes, fighters get an extra feat at level 6 and level 14 for a total of 7, and this is more feats than any other class. Importantly here, one of the things I want to talk about a little bit with feats is, generally speaking, fighters would take feats under the 2014 rules that gave a boost to their different kinds of weapons and their kind of martial archetype. So if you were a two-hand weapon user, you'd probably use something like Great Weapon Master. If you were a ranged attacker, you'd probably use something like Sharpshooter and that kind of thing. And under the 2014 rules, none of these weapon-specific feats boosted your stats. However, under the 2024 rules, all general feats do increase one of your stats by 1. So this benefits fighters a lot because you can still kind of keep up with your expected ability scores at the same time getting those weapon boosting feats that you got before. And so that's just a small rules change that has helped them quite a bit. And now it doesn't feel bad to take some kind of niche feat that doesn't provide an ability, didn't provide an ability score increase under the 2014 rules that does now, like Heavy Armor Master and that kind of thing. Those feats still boost your stats, which is really nice. At level 5, fighters get extra attack. This hasn't changed, but they get a new feature called Tactical Shift. And this says that whenever we activate our second wind with a bonus action, that's our healing use, we can also move up to half our speed without provoking opportunity attacks. This is very powerful in my opinion. You now get extra mobility and a free disengage along with your healing. These are excellent tools if you're melee to help you close with an enemy potentially, potentially when you need to swap targets, or if you just need to disengage, and at the same time it can also help a ranged character recover. If there's an enemy on them, they can disengage, heal up, and get out of the way. So overall, very flexible feat and make something that we already have better. So that's a nice boost for them there. Moving on to level 6, it's our second ability score improvement or feat. No changes here. Although at this point, this is going to be your second general feat. So if you started with a 17 in your main stat, could potentially be up to 19 with 2 general feats here, or be capped with 1 general feat and +2 to that stat. At level 7, it is a subclass feature, nothing new here. Generally speaking, the level 7 subclass features are pretty good. Level 8, it is the third ability score improvement or feat. No changes here. If you took 3 general feats and started with a 17 in your main stat, you could be capped here. At level 9, it is the new and improved Indomitable. And what this says is that if we fail a saving throw, we can re-roll it with a bonus equal to our fighter level, and we must use the new roll, and we can use this once per long rest. Now there's one small and significant change here. That change is that we get a bonus equal to our fighter level. That is just absolutely massive. From here on, this is like you make that save with at least a +9 bonus. This almost guarantees that you'll pass a lot of saves, if not boosting your save chance very, very high. So this feature under the 2014 rules was pretty bad. Basically, if you fail to save, you're probably going to fail it even if you use this feature. But now that you have this bonus, this is a massive boost to your fighter's mental resilience. You should probably use this to shrug off crowd control effects, and this goes a long way to making the fighter more durable. Additionally, we get the tactical master feature here, and this says that whenever we attack with a weapon whose mastery property we can replace that property with push, sap, or slow. This is another excellent feature, and I think it makes weapon swapping, which you might have been using as a tactic up to this point, much less necessary, especially if you only have a single good magic weapon. So, for example, let's say that we were that polearm fighter who was using a pike and a halberd before. If we just had a magic halberd, now our halberd would have cleave, push, sap, or slow for any given attack. So we could push an enemy to set up for a cleave attack. And so now with this, we have a lot more flexibility, and we don't really need to weapon swap anymore unless it's for a very specific case. And I think this is, again, a good thing. I think the weapon swapping, although it's cool, it's a lot of kind of busy work in practice to actually use, and I think most players probably aren't going to be swapping a lot, especially once they have a magic weapon. Moving on to level 10, we get our 4th use of Second Wind and our 5th weapon mastery, as well as a subclass feature. And again, the subclass features at this level are typically pretty good. Level 11, it is our mini capstone of 2 extra attacks, so we can now attack 3 times with the attack action. No changes here. Obviously, this is something that fighters have had forever, at least as of 5th edition. This does enable more complex mastery combos because an extra attack means an additional chance to swap, although again, swapping isn't really as necessary since we got Tactical Master. At level 12, it is our 4th ability score improvement or feat. No changes here. Just something I was thinking of as I've been working on this series. For pretty much all classes, level 12 is just basically an ability score increase for everybody and nothing else. Is it kind of a universally sucky level? I think it kind of might be. Although, of course, as a fighter, our Indomitable bonus to our saving throws will continue to scale. So we have plus 12 to that save that we're going to reroll here. Amazing. But yeah, level 12. At level 13, we get a second use of Indomitable per long rest. This will, again, help boost our mental resilience quite a bit. And we also get the new studied attacks feature. So what this says is that if we make an attack roll against a creature and miss, we have advantage on our next attack roll against that creature before the end of our next turn. Now, this is actually a pretty significant damage per round boost. It makes your landing your attacks a little more consistent, although the math is kind of a little difficult and complicated to do. But importantly, there is no limit to the number of times that you can trigger this on a turn. So if you attack an enemy and miss, you have advantage on your next attack. If you miss that, you still get advantage. And it can carry over into your next turn. And so this just helps you pick a target, stick on them, kill them, which is really what the fighter needs to do. Level 14 is our 5th ability score improvement or feat. No changes here, but at this point it is important to note the fighter is 2 feats ahead of all other classes except for rogues, who do get an extra feat at level 10. At level 15 it is another subclass feature. No changes here. These subclass features tend to be pretty good. For some subclasses, the feature you get at level 15 is arguably better than the subclass capstone that'll come a little bit later. At level 16 is ability score improvement number 6, no changes here. Level 17, we get a second use of action surge per rest. It is important to note that both charges of action surge do reset on a short rest, and we can't action surge more than once per turn. And that's has been a limitation that's been there forever. And we get our third use of Indomitable per long rest. No changes here. At level 18, it is our subclass capstone. This is one of the later subclass capstones of all classes. These features vary in power. A lot of them are pretty good, although for some subclasses like Battlemaster, the level 15 subclass feature is arguably better. At level 19 is our 7th and final ability score improvement, and if you were a pure class fighter at this point, this would be your first chance to get an epic boon feat. No changes here. Finally, at level 20, the class capstone is 3 extra attacks. So now when we take the attack action, we get 4 attacks. There's no changes here. This is a very simple capstone, but it's also very effective. This is, a 33% increase in your damage output if you didn't have any sources of extra damage besides making attacks. All right, with the class features done, let's talk about multiclassing the fighter. So the minimum stat you need to take a level outside of fighter or take a level into fighter if it's not your first class is a 13 strength or a 13 dexterity. This is probably the easiest multi-class requirement to meet of all of them in the game. Most characters are probably going to have at least 13 dex or at least 13 strength depending on what they want to do. And so I think pretty much any class is going to be eligible for a fighter dip. If you take a level in fighter and it's not your first class, you get proficiency in light armor, medium armor, shields, and martial weapons. You only get the heavy armor proficiency if you start in fighter at level 1. So what does fighter go well with? In my opinion, it goes best with pretty much any character that wants to be martially oriented. It can also work pretty well with casters, especially if they want armor, shields, and constitution saving throws, namely things like wizard or potentially cleric, although I think there are better dips for cleric. It can also work for druid, depending kind of on what you want to do. That said, generally speaking, the set requirement obviously very easy to meet. Anyone can take a level in fighter pretty much. There are very few cases where you're not going to be eligible. Casters, again, can use a level 1 start to get armor, shields, constitution saves, which is nice for them, and potentially masteries to bolster their martial abilities. If you saw that the video I put out last week, my Maelstrom Walker build, and I'll put a link to that up there. That build was a druid that I did use a fighter dip to get masteries in as well as heavy armor. But that said, if you're just looking for armor and you don't want to slow your spell slot progression and you still want masteries, there are other things that you can use in fighter because they don't give you spell slot scaling. May not necessarily be the best dip for a caster, especially if you don't take it at level 1. If you are another martial, however, you can improve your martial abilities with things like action surge or potentially gain masteries if you're a martial class that doesn't get them, like monk. You can also improve your armor, like if you want to make a strength-based ranger, you could start with fighter to get heavy armor and that kind of thing. Also, fighter subclasses are often pretty efficient with just 3 levels, and you also get action surge, which is great for a lot of martials. And yeah, overall, fighter is really, really easy to dip. And can be pretty effective and a nice boost. It is the only class that you can get a fighting style with for just a single level as well. So if that's important for your build, you should consider a level of fighter. Primary fighters also can benefit from a dip in just about any class, depending on kind of what your build is and what you're looking to add. Again, because of the multi-classing requirement, it's pretty easy to meet your minimum set requirement as a fighter, so you just need to meet your minimum requirement for another class. And really, you have a fair amount of free stats as a fighter, so that shouldn't really be that hard. All right, let's summarize and talk about some ratings. So the first up here is offense. This is just a measure of how well the character is able to output damage, and I give the fighter a 4 out of 5, at least the core fighter. Now our offense has suffered a little bit due to the loss of the power attack feats, namely Great Weapon Master and Sharpshooter, but in my opinion it's more than made up for by the new class features, namely Weapon Masteries, as well as the fact that the new feats give us stats. Yeah, generally speaking, that is a big deal, and fighters are good at outputting damage even without any of their subclasses. Next up is defense, and I give the fighter a 4 out of 5. I gave them a 3 out of 5 under the 2014 rules. However, their defense is significantly better due to more uses of second wind, so that's more healing, tactical shift, so that's more mobility and a free disengage, as well as the massively improved Indomitable, which boosts your mental resilience a lot. The only thing that really keeps the fighter core class from being a 5-star is defensive reaction type abilities, and or temporary hit point generation. If you were to take, for example, an Eldritch Knight subclass, that would, in my opinion, boost you to a 5-star defensive character. And when we talk about subclasses, I will talk about how the subclasses adjust the core class ratings, and obviously Eldritch Knight will boost this to a 5-star defensive class. Next up is control, and this is kind of their ability to control the battlefield, control enemies, and I give them a 2 out of 5. So it's not nothing, but it's not the best. I think this is a stronger 2 than I gave them in 2014, primarily due to weapon masteries with things like push, sap, topple, that kind of thing. However, fighter's grappling ability has gotten worse because it's no longer based on athletics. It's just it's a saving throw that the enemy gets to make. But yeah, I would say their control is better, although it's not enough to jump to 3 stars, which was something like a cleric. Next up is support, and again, I give them a 2 out of 5. I gave them a 2 out of 5 before. However, this is actually, I would say they're a stronger 2 than before. Their main support abilities are your defensive fighting styles like protection and interception, and you can also use your masteries to potentially boost your allies with things like topple to synergize with other melee characters to give them advantage. You can use push, and you can also use sap potentially to give enemies disadvantage, and those are some of the main ways that you can help your allies as a fighter. Not super impactful, but it's not nothing. Next up is skills. I gave them a 1 out of 5 under the 2014 rules because they had no way to boost their skills whatsoever. However, Tactical Mind is an improvement to the fighter's skill ability. It's not as significant as what Barbarian got, but it is pretty good. It almost, I think, dipping for Tactical Mind is potentially worth it on a skill-based character, especially if you are going with something like a rogue. It's just another way to boost your skills and could be a good thing to have, especially if you were taking fighter levels for like a fighting style and masteries and extra attack and that kind of thing anyways. Finally, complexity. And complexity is a measure of how difficult it is to play the character, with a high complexity rating being a difficult character and a low complexity rating being an easier character. And I give the fighter a 2 out of 5 under the 2014 rules, and I think they are a bit more complicated than before, thanks to things you can do with combos with masteries and swapping weapons, and a little bit more resources to manage with things like second wind. However, I don't think these are enough to warrant bumping it up to a 3-star complexity rating. I think the fighter is still an excellent first character, especially if you have a player that's a bit more mechanically inclined and likes to understand how those different things work and can combine. All right, so thanks for watching. This has been our summary of the fighter class under the 2024 rules. Fighter is arguably my favorite class based on the levels of characters I've used in builds. If you saw my overview of my first 20 builds, and I'll put a link to that up there, I use more fighter levels than pretty much anything else. I think the class is a lot better in 2024, both as a main class, and I'd argue the dip is actually better too, thanks to mastery, but also due to how second wind was buffed and how the feats were changed. The Indomitable buff is just huge, overall, Fighters is a really cool class. I'm looking forward to doing more builds with Fighter for the 2024 rules, although I'll try to keep it balanced because I know I tend to use Fighter a lot. And our next class overview is going to be on Monk. So once again, my name is Nathan. Thanks for watching, and I will see you next time.